the way, like lots of questions this morning about this topic, right? Welcome back, Dr. Trinh.
Hey, good morning, Paul. I like your UC Irvine business hat, by the way.
That's it. I'm an honorary anteater because that's where our studio is. We are we're streaming live from the University of California Irvine's brand new Beal Applied Innovation Center, the place where everybody, all the tech gathers to figure out and find and discover and make things happen here. The UCI Beal Applied Innovation Center. So that made me an honorary anteater, not like you who actually went to the school.
By the way, guess what? Related to UCI.
What?
The Applied Innovation Center has a, I don't know, an incubator.
Oh, yeah. So the whole second floor is accelerators, incubators, VCs, all these people trying to bring technology being developed on campus and turn it into real businesses.
So I'm coming on as a mentor and coach for the incubator program.
You're kidding. Well, how about congratulations? I wish I had some music to play. Yay, Dr. Trinh. Well, the crazy thing is we built this studio during the pandemic because we're a radio station, so we were allowed to go in the building, but it's a university. Almost nobody else has been allowed in the building. So this big, it used to be Broadcom's World Headquarters. It's this 3-story building. It's beautiful. It has a spectacular event space, and on the first floor and the second floor is all this incubators, accelerators, all the stuff you're talking about. The university has its own incubator program for students and faculty and all sorts of others. And then on the third floor is the wet lab. That's what you should check out, where they have all these companies, I think it's about 20 of them, early stage startups for medicine. I don't know what they're doing, but they got all the little, what do you call it, centrifuges and all the stuff to spin and make diseases. And I just the other day, I was over, there's a handful of them there, that it's kind of a secret facility. And I bump into them in the hallway or the bathroom, and I say, "Oh, so what are you working on?" These people look like your kids. They're one group, I forgot what it has, something radical that they're trying to solve, and they just got $1 million in funding to start animal tests on it here. And I'm like, and they look like they're 12. Yeah.
Third floor secret lab at UCI.
That's it. Third floor secret lab.
We just announced it on OC Talk Radio.
Well, I'll tell you how funny it is, and we'll get into your guest this morning. So I moved in there, and again, there aren't many people allowed in the building, but in this lab, they're there. I'm there next door with my new studio, and I bump into these people kind of coming and going with their little secret pass, biometric scans to get into the spaces and everything here. And I only see them when they come out, or we bump into each other in the lunch break room or the bathroom or something. And I'm always curious. I'm saying, hey, I'm over here, OC Talk Radio. Hey, if you want to talk about what you're doing. Oh, no, we're in stealth mode right now. We're in secret trials. We don't want anybody to know what we're doing because they'll copy us and whatever. So I'm foolishly, I got there early one morning, and a FedEx package arrived. And it almost looks like one of those cartoons. It didn't have steam coming out of it, but it was some refrigerated thing.
Right.
And it arrived in FedEx. And the guy looks panicky, and he says, "I got to get this somewhere. It's going to go bad. It won't last. I can't just leave it out here." And I said, "Well, here, I'll take it. I'll put it in. I've got a refrigerator. I'll put it in there. What the heck? It can't be that bad." So I call when they arrive at the secret thing. I say, "Hey, I got a package for you, FedEx." Oh my goodness, 5-alarm fire. Everybody comes in the building. And you took this and did what with it? We got to get the hazmat team in and do all this stuff. You don't know what this stuff is. It could be some genetic material, or it could be biohazard. It could be everything. I said, it was in a FedEx package. It can't be that bad. But they're like so super secret. Oh my goodness. I touched the kryptonite here for 5 seconds,
What do you call it, a wet lab or a meth lab?
Yeah.
Wait, wet lab.
For all I know. No, don't get me in trouble. I already been yelled at a couple of times here. No, it's not a meth lab. It's apparently the only wet lab in Orange County where you can, and they took me on a tour once of it. You'd understand more of it than I do. It costs a ton. They don't just do it for free. It costs like, I don't know, some ridiculous amount, $20,000 a month just to get a space in this lab. And and it's filled out. There's 20 of them already in there, whatever their capacity is. And it's a way that you test, because they have all the super secret stuff, the special way to store hazardous materials, the way to vent hazardous materials, the centrifuges, the way to break down the genetic codes, under
Oh
these
yeah.
little devices, and you see, oh, there's a little gene sequence there, and all this crazy stuff is right here, and they're doing the most incredible. You'd get a kick out of it. I don't know what the heck they're talking about, but they all look like they're 12. They look like kids
12 years
playing with a
old.
chemistry set.
Yeah, they're probably curing cancer right next to OC Talk Radio.
I'm telling you, they are doing literally stuff like that. That is literally the aspirational goals of all this. And to today's point, we'll tie it back in. You have with you a guest who's been with us before, Kandice Hawes from NORML, the national organization. What is it? No, we're going to talk about cannabis, right? But the national organization to normalize, marijuana laws. And seriously look at the Mr. Christian, Mr. Normal, Dr. Trinh goes off on the reservation and starts talking about medical marijuana and the benefits of cannabis. How did we get here, Dr. Trinh? How did a well-respected physician get into this nonsense?
I don't know. After a few puffs, I felt really good about it.
Dr. Trinh.
I've actually never smoked or used the stuff. But,
so I don't think I've asked you that question. And then we'll bring in your guest and she can launch into all what's happening. But I don't know your backstory. You've become a very featured speaker on cannabis topics. That's where we first met. We have another show called My Jane, My Story, where a woman and her husband, a woman used to be some executive with Xerox. This is hardly some old hippies growing it in the backyard. And they're big believers in the potential, not just the profitability, but the potential uses, and it was demonized. It was what's the famous movie, Reefer Madness. It was insanity followed if you even touched this stuff here. How did Dr. Trinh stumble on this and become such a speaker, advocate, proponent, talker on this subject here?
And you're absolutely correct. I'm a member of a conservative, Bible-believing church, Calvary Chapel, and growing up, the only thing we've ever tied, marijuana to was sin.
Yeah, right. Literally,
sin,
yeah.
Dope heads, pot heads, and so anytime I think of marijuana, the first thing I think of is a guy who's shirtless, sitting in his trailer and smoking pot without a job, right?
Exactly.
That's what we've been taught.
Very quickly on the way to shooting heroin and robbing and doing terrible things here. And
that's always been everything we've been taught. But the thing is, when I was taking care of patients on a regular basis, it has always surprised me that that my patients would come to their PCP, primary care doctor, and they'll bring like their product, right? Doctor, what do you think of this, CBD product or this CBD THC product? I've been using it for pain. I've been using it for that, for this. And the first thing that a trained physician like myself would tell you is, I don't know anything about it and I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, right.
Because I don't want to associate this product, cannabis, marijuana, with my reputation, right?
Yeah, right.
I don't want to be associated with potheads and things of that sort, and it's been illegal, right, federally. But it always surprised me that these patients who come to me, they don't look like potheads. They don't look like they sit around and smoke all day. They're they're in the community. They're older patients, often trying to treat their pain because they don't want the Vicodin that I'm going to prescribe them.
Yeah.
They don't want the morphine and the OxyContin and the MS Contin and the fentanyl patches and all the narcotics that I, as a prescription, have been trained to prescribe.
The opiates, which came from opium, this is, why do we accept that? Because it has a pharmacological label on it here.
Yeah, and if if most of us have read up on the opiate crisis, that death rate is going up like this, right? Yeah, it's going like exponentially, double digits every year. It's because our patients are overdosing and dying and getting addicted to opiates, which is completely legal.
Yeah, and many they said many of the problem with this. I watched some. I don't know. There've been so many specials on it. I watched one a while ago, and they said that doctors were taught there's no real harmful side effect of this stuff here, and they passed it out like candy because so much of they can't solve so many of these persistent chronic conditions and pain. So it's just alleviating the symptoms, and that's what you came here for. You want a pill, and they became pill pushers. Not that sounds horrible to put it that way, but that was the easy, quick answer to move on because I really don't have any answer to your chronic pain and conditions.
Yes, and and as someone who's also in the field of medical research, I actually eventually got tired of telling patients I don't know anything about it, and I don't want to deal with it because it's easier for me to write you a prescription for a narcotic, right? Because I know that I don't know anything about marijuana or medical marijuana. So I got tired of just telling my patients I don't know and I don't want to deal with it. So I actually looked into it. I looked into, I went to PubMed, NIH government, site where studies are published, and I just looked at medical cannabis, and there was like over 18,000 journal articles that's been published on it.
Oh my goodness!
It just shocked me, and this was a few years ago when I looked at it, and it's more now. And I looked into the science behind it, and I realized that yes, first of all, this is from a plant, right?
Yeah, right.
And the second question,
it's not a compound like I'm talking about UCI that they're artificially creating from genetic material and or something. It's not something. It's not a new thing that we suddenly.
This is from a plant. The second thing I had to deal with is this sinful?
Yeah.
Right.
That sounds silly to even ask that question in this stage, but that is, I think, the underlying question that many of us and probably many of your listeners are still thinking. Is this wrong? Put it another way. Is this wrong?
Yeah. It's morally wrong. And because I grew up believing, that, marijuana is associated with sin. And it's what we were taught, I'm sure, growing up in our culture, it's what was taught. And I kept having to deal with the facts that, am I a scientist looking at the data, at the potential positive benefits of medical marijuana in treating pain, in treating anxiety, in treating insomnia, right? In treating these issues that's been published, right? Mm-hmm. And there are a few marijuana-based FDA-approved medications out there. Am I a scientist looking at this, or am I a believer looking at it as sin, right? How do I put together
the two halves of your brain here, right?
Two halves of my brain, and then the second thing that I came to realize is, if I'm looking at it from a religious perspective, I had to ask myself, did God create an evil plant?
Yeah, right.
Right? This marijuana plant, if we believe that God created all animals, all plants, did God just create an evil plant that shouldn't be there?
This is like in the Garden of Eden. This is the apple tree we're not supposed to touch here.
Or did we just screw it up by taking this plant, messing with it, getting high with it, and the same way we did with cocaine and all the other stuff, right? Did we just screw it up, or was this plant created for, and it has potentially health benefits, right, in it, which we have seen. And then the third thing I realized that just totally broke down the walls of this emotional religious conflict I had was that the churches are calling me to come and do lectures on CBD.
Churches are okay with CBD, the compound derived from this.
Taking it now, right? All their folks at churches are now taking CBD rubs, CBD oils for their pain, their insomnia. And so, okay, finally, it's like, I can really talk about this now.
Right. Right. And so let's have, we've had your guest patiently sit as I ranted about UCI, as you and as you told that really honest backstory here of your journey to cannabis here. Let's bring in Kandice Hawes from, are you with the Orange County NORML or the National NORML? I forgot which level you're working at.
Yeah, I'm the executive director and the founder of the Orange County chapter of NORML, and have been since 2003. So we're celebrating our 18-year anniversary in July.
So let's talk about quickly your journey to cannabis and the organization's long efforts to have us all take another look at this plant and its potential uses here. Start with you.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I started way back in 2003, like I said. Back then, I was just a college student, and I actually had my college financial aid from the federal government, FAFSA, taken away from me for a possession charge.
Oh, my goodness.
Some of you may not know this, but if you have any kind of possession charge, or used to, actually, the stipulations have changed, and now it's a little bit more restrictive on who actually loses their financial aid. But back then, any kind of possession charge would cause you to lose your financial aid. But, you know, you can murder, you can rape, and you could still get financial aid. But if you use any kind of substance and get any kind of criminal penalties, then you can't, which I just felt fundamentally was really wrong. I actually,
yeah, I guess most of us would kind of go along with that. Let's see, we'll talk on the list of sins: murder, rape, robbery. We'll still let you go to college. Smoke a little joint, forget it, buddy. You're done.
You're on your own, you know, and the government is always saying that they want to reform people, you know, and get them back as productive citizens. But how are you helping people that have possible drug problems by taking away their financial aid and taking away so many things from them? It really kind of puts them into a pit of despair. And I don't think that's really the pathway to, you know, recover and become like a functioning person in society.
So it affected you, and you got mad, and you said, I'm going to do something about this.
Yeah, exactly. And so when I got out of jail, because they actually put me in jail for it, they took away my car, they put it in impound. And, you know, I had just moved to California from Colorado, and I grew up Mormon. And so I was very innocent. And, you know, all my friends used harder drugs. They drank alcohol, and none of that ever really sat with me. I didn't really like it. And I was just always the cannabis person, you know? Mm-hmm. So anyways, after this happened, I got released, and I came back home, and I said, I need to do something about this. So I went on the internet, and I found a couple organizations, but NORML really stood out to me. And so I reached out to them, I told them my story, and they invited me to come down for their conference, which happened to be like later that month. And I came to this conference in 2003 in San Francisco, the National NORML Conference, and it was just an eye-opening experience. You know, here I was, someone that always felt like cannabis was my thing, and there was nothing wrong with it, and I was setting myself on a better path than, you know, some of my friends that like to drink and stuff. But for the first time, I came to this conference, and I was surrounded by politicians and lawyers and doctors and all these people that were really respectable, and even celebrities. Woody Harrelson was at the conference that year. And it's like, all these people think the same way as me. They think that cannabis isn't this, you know, illicit substance that causes problems, and that we should take away the penalties and change the stigma about how they treat people that use cannabis. And so I really found a home there. And from that point on, I started my chapter, and it's just kind of been, you know, since the day that started, it's been on, you know, I've been on the ground and just running. Our chapter since then has become one of the most consistent and awarded chapters of the NORML organization.
In conservative Orange County? Come on.
Yeah. Well, actually, we're pretty lucky, because before I even came around in 2003, previous to that, we actually had a pretty strong group here in Orange County, like in the 1990s, called the OC Hemp Council. And so that was a group even working before my time, when it was even more conservative and hard to talk about. And they were really advocating on the benefits of hemp. So when I came in, I really inherited a lot of these activists that were working on the hemp front, and then came to join NORML.
And hemp is a whole nother conversation here. Hemp is an unfortunate, it's a, what would you call it? A cousin. It's in the same family, but it doesn't have hardly any of the THC, the psychoactive, the part that gets you high. I don't know if it is psychoactive or whatever however you describe it, but it's the part that gets you high, the compound in the plant that gets you high. And hemp has been used for centuries. George Washington grew it. Thomas Jefferson grew it. They used it for fiber. They used it for ropes up until World War II. Every Navy ship in the world had hemp ropes. They used it for food, for animals, feedstock, all sorts of other things. But because it was in the same family, it was immediately thrown under the bus when marijuana began to be demonized. When did the demonization of marijuana happen? In George Washington's day, they knew about hemp. Did they know about marijuana? Did anybody smoke marijuana 200 years ago, 100 years ago? When did we discover the power of this plant to get you high? And when did it become demonized?
Well, it's been used for thousands and thousands of years all across the globe. They didn't necessarily smoke marijuana back then, but they used it in oils, they used it in tinctures, they used it in creams. So they used it in different applications. I'm sure maybe like in some some places maybe they did have smoked marijuana, but you'll find most studies of them using it in other forms. It didn't actually become illegal here in the United States until after the end of Prohibition. We had a fellow named Harry J. Anslinger who ran the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. And well, before then, he actually controlled the alcohol prohibition. And when that was lifted, he was like, I have nothing to do.
I got to prohibit something here.
So
alcohol.
They let find something, you know, that we can control and regulate and keep our jobs.
They let demon rum out of the bottle. Now we got to find some other demon here.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the bureaucrat that he was. And so he was already friends with some business, you know, some people that were really important on the business, you know, side that like ran lumber and timber and like the newspapers and stuff like that. So they all teamed up together, Randall Hearst, to control like the way that people thought about cannabis. And that's where we first saw the first campaigns of people demonizing cannabis and labeling those that use cannabis as like murderous and criminals and that they did crazy things. And this was really a way also that Harry J. Anslinger saw that we can control minority populations. You know, the Mexicans working in the field, the African Americans in the jazz clubs. So not only did this give him a job for centuries to come, but it was a way that the government can control these populations that they, you know, wanted to discriminate against.
Well, and as a good Irish Catholic, I have to say that there's been much written about, I don't know if this is exactly true, but there are many people who believe this, that the alcohol prohibition of the 20s was originally designed from the Bible Belt area, from the middle part of the country, which was mostly, you know, Protestant, which was mostly white. As the flood of immigrants came over in the late 1800s, first from Ireland, and then from Italy, and then from Eastern Europe, all very Catholic countries. They didn't like the Italians drinking wine, the Germans drinking beer, and the Irish certainly drinking everything they could find. And that whole notion, this was their sin. We could control them by controlling this. And it was part of that first wave of anti-immigrant hysteria too. So as well-meaning as the carry nations of the world were to try and stop, which probably was being abused much more in those days, drinking, it was also overly targeted towards communities that had always had drinking associated with them, cultures, versus those like the Protestant Bible Belt kind of middle of the country people who never drank.
And our drug laws are still unequally applied to discriminate against minorities and people that they want to discriminate against. We still see that today. You know, I actually have been let off completely by police officers in the past, like doing things that I should have gone to jail for, where, you know, someone that's a minority or even a male probably would have been arrested for, when it comes to like cannabis stuff, you know.
So when you were arrested, walk me through that. What happened? How did they catch you? What did they catch you with?
Oh, well, it was a long time ago. And so they actually caught me with an ounce, but it was like brickweed, like Mexican brickweed back then. So it was like this like thin, like a sheet of like cannabis. It was like probably worth like $20, but it like, but it weighed more than an ounce. So technically that was a felony. So they actually brought me into jail. Like I said, I was a naive Mormon girl and they threw me in jail. And this is in Las Vegas with like prostitutes and like all sorts of criminals. And even they were like, what are you doing?
1 ounce of this controlled substance. Was that frightening?
And it was like $20 worth of product. You know, it wasn't even like an ounce nowadays that's worth like $400 or something. You know, it was like a menial amount. I didn't even think that I would get in trouble. And the thing is too, back then I wasn't really educated. If I would have known what I know now, I would have told the cop that he didn't have the right to search me, that I didn't want him to search me, and I would have just left. But back then, you know, I was very naive, and, you know, my friend was actually the person got in trouble, and the cop was like, all right, I'm going to let you go. I just want to look through your bag. And I didn't know to say, no, you have no right to search me.
So they didn't have any reasonable grounds to search you. They just kind of like, I want to look through your bag. And you went, sure. And there it is. Oh, what's this?
Yeah, I think I didn't say anything at all. I just was kind of like in shock and I didn't protest. And so that's how I ended up in this situation. But what I always tell people, because this really felt like the worst thing that's ever happened to me. My life was completely ruined. I wasn't going to be able to go to school. I was going to be a felon. Back then I wanted to be a lawyer and I wouldn't be able to take the bar. But it shows that sometimes the worst thing that ever could happen to you and you feel like you're at the lowest point in your life puts you on the path where you're supposed to be. You know, if that wouldn't have happened to me, I never would have started NORML. I wouldn't have had the chance to speak in Washington, D.C. I wouldn't have, you know, been able to meet all these wonderful people and affect change and help people medically. So it's kind of one of those things that, you know, if I could go back in time, I probably, wouldn't change much, because I think that I am now where I need to be because of that.
All right, so let's move to today's topic here, which is primarily, are we going to talk about the CBD part? That's the one everybody seems to, oh, it's not marijuana, it's CBD. You can get it at CVS, for Pete's sakes. And I'll tell you my own little epiphany. I know I look like an old hippie, and I am an old hippie, but I hate to admit it. I've never really smoked marijuana because I don't like cigarette smoke and any of this kind of stuff.
You're a bad hippie.
I'm a bad hippie. I really am. And I'm a good Irishman. I really don't drink hardly at all either. I could lose that easily too. I've just not had any interest or appeal to get high ever in my life. I'm high on life. I don't know, whatever it is. But but I understand how this thing was over demonized and over stigmatized, and we were all taught to be frightened of it. And in fact, more frightened of that than things like cocaine that came about in the 70s and 80s when I was in college. If I'm not mistaken, cocaine has a lower categorization. It's less of a, I don't know, is it less of a felony? You get less of a fine, something. Marijuana is a higher ranked drug than cocaine. I always thought that was ironic because.
Yep. Ever since they created the Controlled Substances Act, marijuana has still remained in the Schedule 1, and that was supposed to be a temporary placeholder until they conducted research and they would put it in the adequate level. And that research was conducted, but the federal government actually refused to deschedule it or to move it down the schedule of drugs. And that's something we still are continuing to fight with the Drug Enforcement Agency.
So heroin, marijuana, same category. Cocaine is what, a Schedule 2 drug? It's a lesser, it's a safer category. So anyway, so here's the quick story. So a couple of years ago, we started doing stories on CBD. This appeared out of nowhere in my world. All of a sudden, bam, what's this thing called CBD? We're not going to call it marijuana anymore or pot, but we're going to pull a substance out. One of the many substances in there, like THC is the one that gets you high. We'll find this other acronym, CBD, and it's an oil, and it has all these anti-inflammatory properties. So one day somebody comes in and talks about this on one of our shows. It's several years ago. And I asked, we have very conservative business types that do shows on our station here, and I asked one of them, have you ever heard of this stuff? Oh, yeah, I use it because I might have problems with my tennis elbow or tennis arm or something. I use it all the time. I said, you're using a substance from marijuana? Oh, yeah, I don't know what it is, but it's CBD. It's magical. And then I go home and ask my wife, who's another, not one I would expect to even come near this stuff here, like, get away from us, and you demon. And she says, oh, honey, not only have I heard of it, we have some in our cabinet upstairs. I'm like, how did this invasion of the body snatchers happen here? What happened to all these people? How did they get taken over? How did that become so normalized so quickly in this country? Let Kandice talk about that. How did that? Marijuana stuff is still a Schedule 1 drug. It's still a crime to possess it. It's still even though the states are allowing it, the feds say it's still a crime. There's this conflict between state law and fed law. But how did CBD get carved out and brought into the mainstream?
I think it's kind of the free market, the business kind of is what brought CBD into the mainstream. Eventually people figured out that, CBD can come from multiple places. It can come from cannabis, it can come from hops, it can come from hemp. And as cannabis derived CBD kind of came more popular, people found out that there was medical benefits to CBD. People figured out that you can also get CBD from hemp, which wasn't as federally illegal, and it was a good business opportunity. So we saw this huge explosion of people selling CBD like at farmers markets and creating their own CBD lines, and that really helped get CBD out into the market. And the CBD industry is very aggressive. They're very good at marketing their product. It's a big industry right now.
And the Republican establishment that I grew up around in suburban Midwest America here has embraced it as a business opportunity. John Boehner, the former Speaker of the House, is now a CBD executive. We had John Lockyer,
who used to be the Attorney General, now owns a cannabis distribution company. So
yeah. I mean, am I the only one whose mouth is open and who's shocked? These are the people who told us this is demon, and now this is the demon seed, and now they're planting it.
Yeah. So once people figure that they can make money off of it, and that it's not actually the same component as cannabis. It does, or as THC. It's not going to get people high, and it has medical benefits, and it has less stigma. They really ran with that, and a lot of people feel more comfortable using CBD as an entry product because they don't necessarily want to get high, like you said. They just want some sort of medical benefits. And so by there being more access to CBD, more people using it, more people talking about it, more people being exposed to it. I could say that right now, it's hard to find a single person in California that doesn't have some connection to somebody in the CBD industry or the cannabis industry. So it's, it was like very—
OC Talk Radio, we have a show, My Jane, My Story. Hey, we're not going to judge. We're just going to have real people come on and tell real stories of their journey with cannabis, particularly for healing, particularly for health, particularly for chronic pain and sleep disorders and all these other things. You judge for yourself. These are just regular, ordinary people that come in every week. We had one last week. It hasn't been published yet, but I'd be curious to get your feeling on this. Are you familiar with Ryan's Law? This thing is trying to make its way through California. And the gist of it, as I understand, is some man who was a big Republican, I believe, lobbyist. His son, I forgot the exact story, forgive me, but his son was dying, and his son was in pain. And so he was in I want to say like a long care term facility or something, and they would not let him take any of this on site, even himself, to try and relieve the pain and suffering he was going through. And so he suffered, and the father was outraged. He's dying, for God's sakes. Let him do whatever makes him feel happy or healthy or takes away the pain. Really. Yeah. And
that bill passed in our state legislature last year, but the governor actually vetoed it. Yeah. So we're trying again this year to pass that law, because we do agree it's like the hospital should allow patients, especially end-of-life care, to use cannabis as a medicine, or just to allow access.
And so everybody out there scratching their head, like I was saying, why would the long-term health care, the whatever you call these facility you go to die, basically, hospice and other such things, why would the hospitals, why would the hospice, why would these care facilities prohibit it? And why would the governor of California, he's not exactly the most conservative guy on the planet here, why would he override it? Fear of federal dollars, because it is still a prohibited federal substance, and they were afraid that they would lose Medicare funding, they would lose state funding, they would lose all sorts of funding if they allowed this to happen. Fear.
Exactly.
Well, what do you say, Dr. Trinh, to everybody who's tuned in this morning here?
Talar Moy on Facebook says, I've had hospice patients use it, but probably on their own, right? Not necessarily promoted by hospice,
right?
That use medical marijuana.
And there's other ways that you can use. You don't have to just smoke it. So they can allow hospice patients to use tinctures, to use edibles, to use topicals. There's other ways that are less invasive, and they won't necessarily, you don't want people smoking in a hospital.
I want to hear some of the other. You have a quiet group today here. I suspect a typical Orange County cross section of
healthcare workers,
well-meaning healthcare workers, maybe a little more on a conservative bent, perhaps.
How many of you guys here on Facebook use CBD with that?
Yeah. I mean, can we out some of you here? Has anybody like my wife got some in their cabinet at home here? Has anybody tried or known any people that used medical marijuana that actually smoked or ingested somehow or other things?
What I've been curious about is, so we're often in Laguna Woods, right? This a community of 17,000, 18,000 retirees in Laguna Woods, and over 200 clubs in Laguna Woods. And a few years ago, what had really shocked me is I do a lot of lectures in the area for the nutrition club, for the ALZOC club, for the college club, university club, all these different things. And I found out that, and this is kind of interesting, I found out that the largest club in Laguna Woods 2-3 years back was the Cannabis Club. I'm like, what is going on here? I mean,
at Seizure World, at Leisure World, come on.
Yeah, it was the Cannabis Club in Laguna Woods, and a good number of my patients were in that club, and I was asking them, why are you in the Cannabis Club? Right? You live in Laguna Woods. I've taken care of you. Why are you in the Cannabis Club? You don't look like a pothead.
No,
you don't look like somebody
a hippie,
who gets high every day. Why are you in this Cannabis Club? And what they told me really kind of shocked me. What they told me was that, Doc, I don't want to take this narcotic that's been prescribed to me. I don't want to be on Vicodin. I don't want to be on Norco. I don't want this OxyContin and MS Contin and fentanyl, because it's causing me issues and side effects and
huge issues and side effects. This is well,
other than overdose and deaths, right?
Yeah, right.
So I've realized that our patients are already there using the stuff because it works, and they're just waiting for the doctors to kind of catch up. The patients aren't waiting for us to give us, to give our blessing. They're using the stuff already.
So many things. We don't just sit and listen. But look at some of the comments on here. Robert says, my VA doctor is the one that recommended CBD to me here. And another person says, my mother has rheumatoid arthritis. What do you recommend?
Yeah. And so cannabis and CBD is really something that have alleviated and taking care of many symptoms.
Because it takes down the inflammation. It's anti-inflammatory, right? Basically.
So patients are already there and using it. They're waiting for the science to catch up, because we got to do our phase 1 clinical trial, our phase 2 clinical trial, our phase 3 clinical trials. We're going through the route to the FDA. It takes 10 years at least to get something from phase 1 to phase 3.
Yeah, right.
And the patients are like, we're not waiting for you. We're using it because it helps.
So who are two questions here, just to answer Carlos's question. I know this isn't we got to be very careful. Go consult your own doctor. This is not a medical advice show. Don't come back later and say, we told you to do something here. Investigate it, find out, talk to your doctor, talk to everybody about this first. But has it been used in rheumatoid arthritis? That was Carlos.
It's been used for all types of arthritis, all types of pain. The first FDA CBD medication was approved 2 years ago for childhood seizures.
Yeah, that's the one I've heard that they... fantastic result. Epileptic seizures and stuff have been
children, right? Yeah. Specific epileptic type seizures in children that are hard to treat. Apparently CBD works because the FDA proved it. And so Carlos, and for those who are wondering, what type of products should I buy?
What should I investigate? We're not telling you to buy anything here. Yeah, right.
I'll recommend I'll recommend the product as soon as I'm selling one, but I'm not. So I don't sell any of that stuff, right? So the first thing I can tell you is that the cannabis industry, especially medical cannabis and CBD, it's in the early phases of scientific research. Mm-hmm. The early phases of scientific research. So what that means is we don't have a dose to recommend for a product, right? I can't say that, for this condition, it's 10 milligrams and 20 milligrams for this, because unless we vet that out through clinical trials, double-blinded, clinical trials that are legit, we don't have a dose to recommend or a product. It needs to be vetted through the scientific process, right? And so we don't have a dosage or a product specifically for a specific condition because it's still early in our investigation, okay? The second thing you should know is that patients really aren't waiting for us anyway. Yeah. They're out there taking the products.
Right.
They're taking different products. And
they're self-medicating. They're experimenting. They're trying stuff, yeah.
Yeah, they're taking the products. They're not waiting for their doctor. And quite frankly, the doctor doesn't know because the research hasn't been done to give us guidance. So So as Robert Brown is saying, in my opinion, too much won't hurt you. So try a little bit as you go, or something like that. So many folks are saying, since we don't know dosing assigned to diagnosis, and since we don't have the studies to say that yes, it works because we tried it on a double-blinded clinical trial, right?
Right.
Many folks are just starting something at a super low dose.
Exactly.
And then they're titrating up like super slowly. And it's done that way mainly for safety reasons. We don't want to OD on it. And
has anybody ever OD'd on any of this stuff? Have there been deaths? Have there been, are there, what's the downside if you take too much? You just get sick, or you just get high, or I don't know, you don't get high off CBD oil. What's the downside? Do we know yet, or do we suspect anything?
Candice?
Yeah, no, there are no reported deaths from cannabis. Like, I've heard people say the only way you can die from cannabis is if a ton dropped out of the sky and like smacks you.
The bale hit you on the head.
Cannabis is that it is relatively a safe, effective medicine used at small doses and used responsibly. If somebody does take too much cannabis, although sometimes they may kind of feel like they're dying, they may have a side effect of like a little bit of paranoia. There's no way that you could die from cannabis. It's not tied to the endocannabinoid system is not connected to the central nerve system. So there's no way that it could stop your breathing or your heart from beating. The best thing to do if you do take too much cannabis is to definitely, stay hydrated, eat some food, try to distract yourself with, TV or entertainment, listen to some music, maybe even just like embrace it and try to go with
write it out.
Or just sleep it off. Yeah. Sleep it off, write it out. Within hours, depending on different methods of different methods of delivery will have different onsets and durations. Edibles typically are the delivery method that new users want to be the most cautious with. With edible forms of cannabis, depending on your digestive system and your genetics and all sorts of things, you could feel the effects of edibles in as quick as 45 minutes. It could be as long as like 2 to 3 hours. So you want to make sure that you don't continue to take edibles thinking that it didn't hit you and then all of a sudden it hits you too quickly. Right. So like Dr. Trinh said, we tell people to start low, to go slow, to give adequate time between doses to make sure that you're not doubling up. And then it's also a really good idea too to keep a patient log. So to write down and to record, what you took, how much you took, how you were feeling before it, what you ate before it, and then, when it started hitting you, how long it lasted.
Do your own clinical study, track it, monitor it, measure it.
Yeah. And then so when you're trying different products, and a lot of dispensaries have sample sizes. So you can go to the dispensary, like I work at the pharmacy, and we have sample sizes of almost every delivery method. So you can take these smaller sizes and try them. Definitely record all this information as you're trying different things. You may need to go back and say, that one day I had a really good effect. What was it that I tried that day? And the people at the dispensary are very good intentioned, and they do want to help you. So even if you're not ready to make a purchase that day, anyone now in the state of California over 21 can go into a dispensary and just use it as an educational experience.
Right.
Talk to the cannabis specialist there. Look at the products. Look at the labels. Ask questions, and then have that in your tool chest. And then, should you need cannabis ever down the road, you have that information to go off of.
And we just have to change our thinking that these people aren't pushers but healers.
Exactly.
There's a different view.
There's a lot of roles that these cannabis specialists have to play. There are a lot of times like counselors and friends and coaches and pharmacists almost. A lot of these folks that got into it really believe in the medical benefits of cannabis and helping people. And so, for the most part, everyone that I've ever met has good intentions and want to help people.
All right, we've only got about 10 minutes left here. Let's see if we can answer a couple questions and bust a couple other myths here. Or concerns. I'll tell you my concern before we address some of the questions here. And I think this is a legitimate one, but that's my feeling. So why wouldn't I feel it's legitimate? All our feelings are legitimate, right? I wonder, because it's not regulated, I'm going to go the opposite way, because it's not allowed and regulated by the FDA, what I'm really taking. And there have been many studies, all the natural, homeopathic, natural things that mothers and all these things, you think, wow, I'm going to take this because I heard this helps. And it might. But when you take that little bottle and really open it up, or that pill or that brownie or that something, you don't really know what you got. It might be a ton of it in there. It might be none of it in there. And so because it's the Wild West and these products aren't regulated in any way, shape, or form. Talk about that. How do I know what I'm getting?
Well, actually, in the legal cannabis market, the products are very much regulated.
Yes,
very
now in this,
rated.
right.
Yeah, now. After the
market.
passage of Prop 64 and MACURSA that passed at the state legislature, the cannabis industry is very heavily regulated.
From seed from source to seed, whatever they call it. I forgot the term.
Exactly. From seed to sale, the whole process is tracked. And then before a product actually hits the market, it has to go through compliance testing, which means that the product is delivered to a laboratory by a distribution company, and like the product is quarantined and it's tested and it's batch tested at different points to make sure that it's consistently dosed. And that's a mandatory. Products have to be consistently dosed, and they have to be accurately labeled, and they have to be free of any kind of pesticides, molds, anything. And in fact, the testing and standards that they've set for cannabis products are so high, almost to like a 0% range, that you can have any kind of these bad things. It's like 10 times higher than what they allow in the grocery stores. So in the grocery stores, even like organic produce, they allow a certain amount of pesticides because they know that there's no way that you can control what's in the air. And it's just, if there's somebody at a farm down the road 2 miles using pesticides, there could be some spray off and it ends up in your product and it's not your fault. So they allow that to still be organically labeled at the grocery store, but they don't give that same allowance for the cannabis industry.
No.
And so if you want to eat completely organic and pesticide free, eat all your food from a dispensary.
Yeah,
we have the most organic products.
So again, I think that what you're pointing out is a good point, and it's been the struggle with the legal cannabis industry as they fight, because that means it's more expensive because it's regulated. Those who still want to get it off, on the black market from your friends, from the growers, from wherever you got this stuff before. That's the Wild West. You don't know what you're getting. It might be stronger doses. It might be low doses. It might have other things interlaced with it because it's a crop. It might have pesticides. It might have other harmful components in there. So until the world, the legal industry is struggling to do this right under these exacting standards, which are there to protect us and help us know what we're getting, but we aren't helping because we say, I'm going to save a couple bucks and just go buy it off market here somewhere.
No, and the nice thing about regulated product is it's consistent. So if you buy a candy bar and it's 100 milligrams, which is the max, it's going to be broken down into 10 milligram delineated dosages, and you can absolutely guarantee and rely on the fact that that is going to be 10 milligrams every single time you take it. So once you do find your lowest effective dosage, then you can come back and you can rely on that. You know that you use this much of a product and it makes you feel a certain way.
How about the other one that concerns me, and I'd be curious to hear, is the whole notion. It's what turned me off in the beginning. Smoke. I'm anti-cigarette so big, and I find it difficult to believe that ingesting any kind of smoke into your lungs. And they, for many years, we did a show on vaping, and they said, "Oh, vaping's the answer because it's water vapor. It doesn't have all the carcinogens in cigarette smoke." But now they're wondering if water vapor doesn't have all sorts of negative effects ingested into your body too here. And there's been all sorts of blowback about vaping and whatnot here. I understand. If I were going to do it, I would ingest it, or I would do it as a topical and rub it. I find real personal problem putting any sort of smoke into my lungs. It just seems not to make sense.
I think one of the best ways to actually use cannabis is sublingually. And some people, seniors especially,
under the tongue, sublingually. Yeah, you put it under your tongue.
So that means that you're taking the cannabis that's been made into an oil and you're dropping it under your tongue. You want to make sure that you hold it there in your mouth for as long as you can, at least a minute. If you can do 2 minutes, even better. And then that way the cannabis is actually entering your blood system faster. It's absorbing into your mucosal membranes and getting into your blood system faster. It doesn't have to do all the work of going through your liver and your intestines to get into your system and to get the relief that you need. And again, smoking is not the best way to use cannabis, but for some people that need immediate relief, smoking or inhalation vaporizing cannabis is good for that immediate
because it goes into your lungs and then gets absorbed quickly into your blood system through that way. Right.
But I would always prefer something like a sublingual. And then now we have a lot of really cool products, transdermal products. So topicals that are actually able to soak in through the 7 layers of your skin and get into your blood system topically, which is pretty neat. So they have patches that can stick to your skin for like 24 hours and deliver you cannabinoids throughout the day, which is pretty neat.
Where do you think this is headed, Dr. Trinh? And I'll start with Dr. Trinh. The laws have changed dramatically. When are we going to see, well, we'll forget about federalization. We'll come back to Candice with that. Just in terms of acceptability of these products, is there any barrier left? I'm listening to your audience here, and I don't hear anybody ranting and raving saying we're going to hell or hell no. I won't go. I won't try any of this stuff. There seems to be a open-mindedness I've never seen before.
There are a lot of clinical trials currently ongoing. And Dan, that includes clinical trials for pain, arthritis, neuropathy, autism, ADHD. I can think of a ton of clinical trials ongoing at major academic centers. UC San Diego's doing it. A number of UCs are doing cannabis.
UCI is doing it. Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, and so yeah, it's something that in the last few years our shift has changed, and it's not because the doctors are like, wow, we've already suddenly realized how beneficial this is. It's more because the patients are using it with or without our permission.
Right.
And so we're like, okay, we better study this stuff now.
My late aunt, who died a few years ago at 93, the most Republican woman I've ever met in my life, the typical, suburban right-wing Republican voter here. Well, I shouldn't say right-wing, but she was extremely conservative. She voted straight Republican ticket her whole life here. And as her life was coming to its last chapter, she called me up once and she said, what do you hear about this medical marijuana stuff? And I'm like, you are asking me about medical marijuana? Well, I got this constant pain and I can't get rid of it. She had all sorts of pains. She had cancer and she had all sorts of things. And at that point in her life, all this orthodoxy didn't matter. It was relief. It was what works. And this is a woman who trusted her doctor implicitly. She wasn't asking her doctor about it. She's asking her radical, left-leaning nephew, who we argued continually about everything here. That to me was the epiphany for me. That was the eye-opening moment. When we're in pain and hurting, particularly as aging baby boomers, we're not just going to wait. We're going to do something.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, I can't tell you how many people I've experienced working at the dispensary that used to be police officers in their former life, that they were the most conservative people that never thought they would have ever used cannabis and didn't use it for so many years and suffered. And then once they experimented with it and they realized that it did have medical benefits, they were like, they felt so bad, for condemning it for so long and for making people feel bad for using it. When now they've actually figured out that it's actually not as bad as they thought it was.
Last question, and we'll end with this. We have a new administration in town. There's hope. There's feeling that something's going to change at the federal level. Where you guys are actively involved in legislation, where do you think the current Fed's stance is and is going?
I really think that federal legalization is right there on the horizon. Chuck Schumer has said that he has intentions of trying to federally legalize marijuana with or without the President Biden's his support. Kamala Harris also has pledged her support to end marijuana prohibition. So I really think that towards the end of this president's term, maybe even the next one, that we will see some sort of change in the federal legalization, which will be great on a lot of levels. That will give access to all veterans at the VA. It'll increase our ability to do research, to do testing, and to figure out a lot of those things that have been holding a lot of people back, like dosing. And there's so many other cannabinoids in the cannabis plant that we don't even know what they do yet. So it'll give us the funding and the ability to really research this plant like it should be researched. There's so many secrets within this plant and so many benefits. And so federally legalizing this plant will open it up to so many more people. And then one thing I hope is that we will one day have the right to travel with cannabis. Oh. So now if you're a patient traveling to another state, even if that state's a medical marijuana state, you can't travel with cannabis. But with federal legalization, that kind of stuff.
Because the feds regulate interstate commerce, interstate transportation. So if you move from state to state, even if that's been the conflict. I went to law school a million years ago. That's the thing that amazes me. Yes, Fed law always trumps state law. in the way our system is set up.
Interstate commerce touches everything, so that's their way to get into anything.
Yeah, and yet, how many states now have fully legalized? A few more. This
18, I think they said, was the most recent number of states that have legalization, not just medical. Medical's like up there in the 40s.
Yeah,
we're almost completely medical marijuana and across the country. But yeah, just recreational use is now just skyrocketing. Like every week we see a new state.
I want to say there's 18 or 20 or something like that. Maybe I'm off, but it's a large number of states. And the problem is that even though the states say it's okay, as long as it's federally, so the states have, under Obama, they said they issued an order saying to the attorney generals, to the federal, what do they call them?
The Drug Enforcement Agency. They took away their funding, so they couldn't spend any of their funding going after companies in states with medical marijuana laws.
Right, exactly. And federal prosecutors, they said, don't go after this. We don't want to get in a conflict between the feds say no and the states say yes. Until this is resolved, just kind of lay low on that. Although under the last administration, there was a lot of talk. Jeff Sessions and others were saying, no, we're going to start enforcing federal law. I don't care what the stupid states say. We're for states' rights in certain issues, but not this one. Exactly.
Luckily that didn't happen. So
yeah. So anyway, I think we're still in that transitional place here. And I see it moving quickly, as Dr. Trinh said, with or without the doctors riding along, with or without the politicians riding along. When the public rises up and says, we're going to do something, pretty hard to tell them not to.
Yes. And Dan Daly says, don't rely on politicians, push for FDA approval.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's being, those studies are being done, Dan.
Well, Dan Daly, another good Irish Catholic here like me, who's rethinking their whole positions on all of this stuff here. Well, thank you for coming on. How do they reach NORML? How do they join NORML? How do they support? Oh, and let's do one more. I know we're a minute or two over. Let's do a quick shout out to a local issue right now in Costa Mesa you wanted to bring up.
Yeah, Costa Mesa on 420 is going to be voting to allow retail uses in the city, storefront and delivery. But they're starting at the very top of their tax. Their tax could be 4 to 7%. They're starting at 7%. There's no lower tax for patients, which most cities have a lower tax rate for patients because they're living on a fixed income. Oh. And these issues, we're asking people to please come to the Costa Mesa City Council meeting on 420 and to speak your mind. Let them know that patient access and affordability is really important.
In 5 days, you can go to the Costa Mesa City Council. Everybody who's railing against, don't trust the politicians, don't trust the government, don't let anything stand in your way. If there's relief, go find it. And what people don't realize is even in the state of California, where it's now legalized, that the cities can still prohibit the sale of it in their city. And of the 34 cities in Orange County, I believe there's only one, which is Santa Ana, which allows dispensaries. And that's why there's like 30 dispensaries in Santa Ana, and there are none in any of these other 33 cities.
And then Stanton's in the middle of doing their licensing. So they'll have 4 in Stanton within the year, and then Costa Mesa will be right behind them. But yeah, for the last 6 years, it's been only Santa Ana.
So people assume, well, it's legal, I can go get it anywhere. Well, the feds say no, the state says yes, but the local city says not in our city. Go buy it next door. So it's amazing how this is still fighting its way through.
I don't understand what 420 means. I know
the date.
I don't know why it's called 420. What does that mean? How is it connected to marijuana?
Well, there is a lot of stories of how 420 became synonymous with cannabis, but the most popular story is that there was a group of high school students like up north in California who every day after school would meet at 420 and smoke weed. And so for some reason, this somehow became part of our culture. And for some reason now at 420 is the time to smoke weed and to celebrate with your friends. On 420 is like our National Cannabis Day of like celebration.
I didn't know that. All right. I didn't know
that. And it just started with like a small group of high school students smoking together back in the 70s.
So I was mistaken. So when does the Costa Mesa City Council? I thought you were just saying like April.
It's on 420.
On 420 too. Okay.
Coincidentally, the council scheduled it for 420.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
Wow.
And we actually had a Senate bill. We have a Senate bill in California that's SB 420 as well. So The Senate's in on it. The city council's in it. You know, this is a mainstream thing.
The universe is moving in a mysterious way here. It's all coalescing around this. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Take us out, Dr. Trinh. You always open the door, and for a while everybody sits silent, and then they start chiming in saying, you know, I've tried CBD, and yeah, my aunt's tried CBD, and I'm sort of thinking of this and trying this, and why are we all living in the dark ages on this planet? Why are we still living in fear? What do you say, Dr. Trinh?
Well, I say our patients are already there.
Yeah.
They're definitely not waiting for us. We're doing the studies, we're doing the research now, we're catching up, right? But our patients are there, and we got to figure out a way to not prescribe all these opioids that are just causing lots of deaths and overdoses, and this may be the way out of the opioid epidemic unless we figure something different.
From your lips to God's ears. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for coming on today here. How do they reach NORML again if they want to support you or join you?
They can look up our website, Orange County NORML. That's NORML.org.
Okay. Orange County, the whole word?
Yeah, whole word, Orange County NORML.
And you guys have meetings, membership, newsletters, podcasts. We got to get you a podcast. I keep saying you guys should be doing a podcast on this. This is the new way to tell stories here. Yeah. Yeah,
definitely. We'd love to. But yeah, all of that kind of stuff. Monthly, consistent meetings every second Wednesday of the month. Emails, activities, events. Definitely get involved.
Okay. Well, we've all been dragged along into this, and we've all been dragged along out of the troglodyte era into the new world. And as Dr. Trinh says, whether society, whether the forces that be in doctors and pharmacies and drug companies and political circles like it or not, this is where the people have moved, and they're still moving there en masse. And why not join the movement rather than try and stop the movement? All right. Well, there you have it. Another reason why you should tune in each and every Thursday right here on Orange County's only community radio station, OCTalkRadio.net. For more health talks with Dr. Trinh, join the Face group. Send us your questions. Tell us what you'd like to hear coming up.